Next, I invite Dr. Colin Butler from Great Ormond Street Hospital, London. He was supposed to be here with us in person, but unfortunately, we only have him online today. Dr. Butler is actively involved in research and has authored over 100 publications. He is involved in novel gene therapy approaches and mucosal sheet technology for airway. On to you, Dr. Butler.
All right, we're good to go then. Well, thank you for the invite. I was hoping to be there in person, but got held up via a variety of issues. But I'm glad to be able to present this at least online. So I'm talking about what was being alluded to a bit earlier about tracheal transplantation. We're one of the few units that have done a tissue engineering approach for tracheal pathology that's so extensive that there are no other options available. And it's to a little bit give you an update of where we stand and our own experience of this approach at Great Ormond Street. And like Nagarajan was talking about, we're part of a bigger team involving lots of different specialities. And so this credit goes to the whole team approach. So I just have nothing to declare. Just to give you a little overview of what we do, we do complex tracheal pathology extending from distal to proximal. And we see lots of permutations of diseases and approaches to this. And as a result, we are in a position in the UK where we accept all the main referrals for complex tracheal disease to one unit. And so we're very super subspecialized. So talking about tracheal failure, so this can be for multiple reasons, from stenosis, fistula malignancy, and can be a result of failed surgery. We see quite a fair proportion of this, but it's important to remember it's rare. But it is essentially a plumbing problem. And there are two different ways to think about this. In the trachea, can you patch it like a bike tube, or can you replace the whole tube as a replacement option? So patching, that has been slightly talked about before. You can patch different areas of the trachea, and this used to be a very old-fashioned way of dealing with the problem. But it is still quite versatile, and obviously a pericardial patch is a very useful way of dealing with some of the problems with either augmenting the airway or when resection is required, and to patch certain areas up. There are different materials that can be used, including cartilage, pericardium homografts, and artery type replacement options as a patch, but they have all their caveats. One of the previous types of repair was using a graft called a Herberhold tracheal graft, and you can see in this instance it's used as an anterior patch on the anterior wall. But when we're considering extensive tracheal disease, is a resection really possible? And if it's very extensive, involving proximal and distal components, can you actually bring the ends together? And this is not possible in a lot of the cases. So this is where tracheal replacement with a tube might be considered. And when we're thinking about replacement options, we have to think about what the trachea does. It has mechanical properties. It has to be laterally rigid. It has to be able to withstand proximal and distal extension. And it has to be able to withstand the kinking effects of lateral torsions. It also has microfunctions, such as the epithelial barrier, with the mucociliary escalator and ciliary function with it. It produces mucus, and that is protective in most instances. Now, tracheal replacement is not necessarily new, and there are lots of been options and gets recycled a lot over the last 50 years. Allografts, heterografts, synthetic grafts have all been used, including autologous and allografts. And different cycles of this has occurred over the years. So if you look at the history of this, you can see fascia, metal grafts, silicon tubes have been used at all different stages, but there has been a move towards biological grafts in the later years. Tissue engineering has come about in an attempt to look at replacement strategies for a variety of organs, and this was applied to the trachea in the first instance. And autologous cells, the concept of this is that you use autologous cells obtained from biopsy, you try and expand it and replace it into a scaffold of some sort that represents the trachea, and then replace it back into the patient. We have now 3 experiences where we've used a biological type graft. And the first one was based in 2010. We attempted another graft in 2012, and these are well published, and a third one in 2015. And I'll go through the third experience, partly because the biological grafts have slightly evolved over time. It's important to note that these are all being done for compassionate reasons, because there have been no other options and we've exhausted normal standard care pathways. So in 2015, we have a child, as you can see, a devastating button battery injury. And you can see, looking endoscopically, how there's a very big hole. At the time, a slide tracheoplasty with end-to-end esophagus was repaired. We used stents at the time to try and support the airway, but unfortunately it failed, and we had a Gore-Tex graft that used as an interposition, which unfortunately migrated through 1.5 years after the initial event. A patch was used, but a fistula tract was quite evident, as you can see. And we often use bronchograms to confirm both dynamically and also to confirm the tract and the extent of the tract. A tissue engineering approach was used, partly based on the previous evidence that we had in children. And the approach to this is using a cadaveric trachea, decellularizing, which is a process where you apply a variety of detergents and enzymes to break down the cells to leave a scaffold graft on which cells can be potentially seeded. And this is the setup where it can be performed in one chamber, and it leaves you a graft which looks very akin to normal trachea at the time. In this case, you can see the defect and the positioning of the graft. This positioning, we applied the trachea in a slightly inverted way, so to protect the area with further cartilage. Intra-op, these are some of the photos, showing it being sort of parachuted into position. And one of the components which I'll allude to is actually ensuring adequate vascularization of the area. So an ammental graft is placed over the top. And this is just to show the evolution of these grafts over time. So at 7 days, 14 days, 16 weeks, and 10 weeks afterwards. And one of the important components that we've learned is the need for mechanical support in the early phases due to the remodeling that occurs with these biological grafts. So as you can see, at 10 weeks, and then at 3 months, and then at 8 months and 20 months, you've got remodeling with remucosalized surfacing in that area. Certainly when you look at 20 months down the line, you can, when you take biopsies around that area, you're starting to get what looks and appears like normal epithelialization. These are staining for different markers of the cells. So P63 is like a basal epithelial cell marker. FOXJ1 is a marker for ciliated cells, and MUC5AC is a mucus producing cells. So these are quite similar to what you would expect to find in the trachea at essentially in the normal areas. And you can see how this is her much later down the line. She's leading a normal life. So what we've learned from these previous graphs, well, more importantly, we've learned about how mucosal lining is very important. Biomechanical support is also incredibly important, and the vascular supply is inherently needed to ensure that the graft survives. There are other approaches, so I should stress that other units have tried different approaches, and obviously there's a lot of controversy in the field with previous grafts used, particularly the sort of non-biological grafts where it hasn't worked very well. So to go through some of the other approaches, people have used vascularized allografts with immunosuppression. Some people have used a chimeric approach, which is they used a vascularized allograft, which is placed on a forearm flap, and immunosuppression is gradually withdrawn. Other groups have used aortic cryopreserved allograft as a free graft, and some people have used an immunosuppressed approach to these tracheal allografts. So I'll talk about some of the other sort of approaches. This is Delari's work from Belgium, and he has advocated for using a tracheal graft on a radial forearm flap, where you give immunosuppression and then withdraw it, and particularly denuding the epithelium at the time. So this requires quite a long period of time where you put the allografts on the forearm, and the epithelium is removed because it's the most allogeneic component in the actual tracheal graft. But what this approach does do is actually establishes a vascular supply on a pedicle. Cryopreserved aortic matrices have been used by our French counterparts, Martineau's group, and they've used it with good effect. So they use allografts derived from aorta, and they use it as a tubed graft, which hasn't need any particular vascular supply other than using muscular grafts to supplement the area. They've now done 20 patients and shown that they can graft at different lengths, but the predominantly has been in adults and not in children. The Mount Sinai team in 2021 did en-bloc tracheal and replacement strategy, and what they used was a piece of trachea essentially with its vascular supply, and they deemed it vascularized by taking both the carotids and the internal jugular veins with the vascular supply to the thyroid and the extension of the supply inferiorly, and replaced it en bloc, as you can see here, for the whole trachea. And that was in one adult recently, where the long-term results are still awaiting. So from a tissue engineering point of view, we know that vascularization is really important, and angiogenesis is also important. And what we've shown that in these decellularized tracheal grafts, that it takes a long time for this to occur. When you add cells and small molecular compounds to it, it can provide some benefit. But what we've shown from before is that it takes up to 15 weeks of time for any vascularization to occur. And these are sort of implanted tracheal segments on the back of mice, showing that you do get some vessel formation, but it's only at around week 15. And this is confirmed on histology. You can see markers for vessels, which is endomucin in this context, is in the perichondral area at week 15. The other question of how to improve tissue engineering approaches is how to improve epithelial engraftment. And so one of the ways that we've been looking at it is how to expand cells and add cells to these grafts. And these have to be the patient's own cells. And what's really quite clear is that we need a lot of cells, 1 million per centimeter squared, to get adequate coverage. In a child, where we're talking about the total graft, we know that the large number of cells required involves taking a large section of the airway. And so one of the challenges is how do you get pinch biopsies, which is the only way to get cells from the own individual to expand sufficiently of sufficient quality to cover the whole airway. And we've shown that there are now ways of doing this. We can expand cells almost indefinitely to get the required amount that we need. We can differentiate the cells. And we can also put them into a relevant mouse model to show that we can get cells to convert and engraft in a heterotopic xenograft model. So the next question is whether we can move towards airway mucosal sheets. And this is an area that I'm very interested in. And now we can show that we can make mucosal sheets generated from patient airway. We can put them onto stents and we can deliver it as an epithelial sheet for engraftment into the airway. And this has applications to things like laryngotracheal reconstructions, particularly those with stenotic airways. And we learned that this is feasible, particularly from our adult colleagues. This is from one of my adult colleagues at Charing Cross, Giri Sandhu, where we can show that we can put split skin grafts into the airway. And this concept is where we wrap a piece of skin, place it on a silicone stent, and place it into the airway for a period of time, typically 2 weeks. And you can see here how you get engraftment of squamous skin into the airway, but helps reduce stenosis because it's acting as an antifibrinolytic component to the airway. So the dream is really to try and do that with airway mucosa because squamous skin is the wrong type. And so we're looking at different models. So one of the ways to do this is using a rabbit airway model, which is sort of can be nearly to the size of a neonate. We can track cells. So we tag them with a green virus. And we can show that the cells which light up on imaging. So this is a bit of graft material where we wrap it around the stent. And we place it into the rabbit and track it accordingly. So you can not only are they green, but they also are light up on bioluminescence so that we can show that it's the same cells. So here we show that there is survival of these cells in the grafts. It is a work still in process, but we're getting towards there to replace these grafts in the future. So to conclude, there's no real ideal substitute at the moment, but we do have some early data showing that tracheal grafts and tracheal can be feasible. There are some differences between adults and child, and this still needs to be looked at, but vascular supply may be the big thing, the difference between the different groups. And obviously what the optimal biological graft is, we don't know, but there are still hopes that regenerative solutions may offer some solutions, even if it's in different segments, such as airway sheets and things in the future. Nonetheless, we have shown that it is feasible in some of the dire situations which we're faced, that this approach can certainly be feasible. So tracheal transplantations, are we there yet? Well, there is a lot of controversial data, but there's also good data emerging that some of these approaches can work in some situations, and we still need a lot of work before we get there, and the road is ever winding. We have a massive team to thank, and these are just some of the people that have worked on it in the past. Thanks, and I'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr.